Monday, the college basketball season is upon us. I feel like we should start with more of a bang, but just about everybody plays basically guaranteed bye games. Brian Geisinger, our friend, man who knows more about basketball than any human being I know, 24/7 Sports, BuzzBeat podcast at bgeis_bird. All right, sir. Let's. Why don't we start with the Blue Devils? Because I feel like we're going to end the season with them. As young as they are, I feel like that's where the season is going to end, watching a Duke basketball game in April on a Monday night. How crazy is that?
I don't think it's too crazy. I mean, obviously, a million things, 10 million things can break and move in different directions, and the NCAA tournament is so unpredictable.
Right.
Who knows? But and there's other very compelling teams out there. I watched Alabama and the Wake Forest scrimmage from a few weeks ago, and Alabama looked pretty amazing in that game as well, despite missing two of their better players. But, yeah, and you don't want to pull too much away from the exhibition games, but there is a really nice roster that's been put together in Durham between the high-end talent of, the incoming freshmen led by Cooper Flagg and Conkanipple and Common Malawash, then with the veterans that were brought in through the transfer portal,
right,
that can help as, occasional drivers of offense, but also guys that just are totally additive with Mason Gillis and Sion James, Malik Brown, who really looks like a guy that's going to contribute for them defensively. And then with the returning backcourt of Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster. But there's a lot of shooting on this team. There's a lot of playmaking talent. There's a lot of cool stuff they can do defensively. They've got great size and length. And John Shire and his staff are really good. And so, this is an organized team that seems to have good chemistry at the moment. And just from what I've seen in, the two preseason games, I like some of the new stuff they're implementing in offensively. And long story short, they're doing that to help open up the rim for drives and to give, Cooper Flagg good opportunities, being a guy that's initiating five-out offense for them this season. So it's a really nice mix, and this team has the chance to be pretty special this season if things click for them.
Right, and if they stay healthy and all of that, and Cooper Flagg is 17, he will not turn 18 until December. Brian Geisinger, 24/7 Sports, is joining us here in the Adam Gold Show. I'm just going to draw an analogy to football, and it's the opposite, really. Football, college football, in no way prepares players for the NFL. They just don't. Quarterbacks are not college teams do not use NFL-style offenses. Some NFL teams have adapted what they do to utilize what the college guys are trained to do, but it's not necessarily an NFL-style offense. Through our conversations, you have intimated that John Shire is implementing, in many ways, NBA-style offenses. Is that a fair account of what we talked about?
Definitely. And I think there are plenty of teams that find a way to mix these, concepts and principles in. But one of the things that you're seeing Duke do this season, they played a lot of five-out last year around Kyle Filipowski, right? Where they would initiate, they have five guys above the three-point arc. Kyle Filipowski has the ball in the middle of the court, and they start the possession by launching into handoffs or screens on one side of the floor. What you're seeing this year now is they're often putting Cooper Flagg in the role of Kyle Filipowski. Cooper Flagg is the team's de facto power forward. So what are you doing with your center? Well, instead of putting the center in the dunker spot, by the rim or space to the corner, where you saw Mark Mitchell a lot last season, and that allowed opponents to play off of him and help protect the rim. They're putting that center, so Malawash or Brown, and they're putting that player on the wing. And without going into all of the details, it changes the spacing in the half court for the offense. It changes the help responsibilities for that player. and it opens up the basket for drives. And this is something that the Atlanta Hawks and Quinn Snyder used last season so they could run 5 out around Jalen Johnson as their power forward. It's something the Boston Celtics have done to run 5 out around Jason Tatum. The Charlotte Hornets are using it in the preseason, or have used it in the preseason and at the start of this year too. It's something that J.J. Redick and Tyrese Halliburton talked about on J.J. Redick's podcast last season before he became the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. So, look, I don't know when or how organically or inorganically or like whatever the inspiration was for this, but it does allow Duke, and they're not doing it every time down the court, but it has been a big piece for them through the exhibition games. It allows them to space the floor, go 5 out with Cooper Flagg, and then turn that center into a screener, whether on ball or off ball. So we'll see how it works, but so far, I think that the all too early returns are rather encouraging. So I'm excited to sort of like monitor it throughout the season.
Brian Geisinger is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. I watched the game against Arizona State. It was mind blowing. The shooting, especially in the second half. Con Knippel looks like a better version of Luke Kennard. The fact that Darren Harris and Isaiah Evans are likely going to not play at all, and they are that good, it to me boggles. But look, we do have to wait and see what it looks like over the course of the season. Their non-conference schedule is quite challenging, and that's good. It needs to be because these guys need to be like. I'll be curious to see how it progresses, but I have very, very high expectations for them. I have the same, maybe not exactly the same. Like, I think if you looked at the rankings, Duke to me is slightly underrated at 7. I think North Carolina is slightly overrated at 9. Doesn't mean they're not going to be excellent. Doesn't mean they couldn't make a Final Four or win a national championship. I just think there are more questions for UNC. RJ Davis is an absolute known. Give me some of the other questions for the Tar Heels that need to be answered.
Yeah, I mean, nothing needs to be said about RJ at this point. He's amazing.
One of the best players in college basketball. Easy.
One of the best, can play on and off the ball. Like, he's super malleable and dependable, and he's played in a million big games. He's awesome. I think for UNC, like where I would start, pretty obvious, but just sort of like, how are you? They have great players in town to like fill the void of Armando Bacot, but like.
Right.
They're different player types. So, like, what does the center rotation look like for UNC this season? I liked Ben Allen Lubin a lot when he was a freshman at Notre Dame a couple of years ago. As a guy pretty athletic at the 5, could run the floor. I think he's going to really help the pick and roll offense. Jalen Washington is a guy that, in terms of like frame and skill set, I've liked for a while.
Right.
It's year 3. It's a big year for him, but like he can screen and dive, but also like pick and pop and face up. So I'm kind of curious to see like if one of those guys, like which one of those guys sort of like solidifies themselves. And like if it is Washington, then it's also like a pretty good like player development, story also for UNC. And I'll be curious to see like what Seth Trimble's role looks like this season.
Yes.
Like he had a great role for them a year ago as like an athlete defender off the bench, right? And like it was a good role for him, cutter, move it off the ball, defend. But as we saw at the end of the season last year, like the way Alabama guarded UNC, which was taking, Grant Nelson, their center, and putting that guy either on Cadeau or Seth Trimble and just not honoring them as shooters.
Right.
So I do think one of the bigger sort of like question marks to know whether it's been answered or not is like what, like Cadeau and Trimble were great players last season, but have one or both of them made leaps as like shooters because that changes the overall ceiling, I believe, for UNC's offense. And yeah, I'll just be kind of curious to know like Cadeau as a, talent wise, where he is coming into his sophomore season, because excellent passer, sees the floor, can really drive. But, teams were able to guard him a certain way. Alabama's not the only team that, like, played off of Elliot Cadeau and Seth Trimble last year. Duke did it as well. So I'll be curious to see sort of, like, they return a fair amount of players. Where are some of those guards from like an offensive production standpoint?
Yeah, I have incredible. I cannot wait to watch this version of Seth Trimble. I think Trimble's going to have a tremendous year. I think he's more capable of impacting the game at both ends of the floor without a jump shot. I think Cadeau needs a jump shot because my one fear of North Carolina is defensively they're small at the guard spots. Their two best guards are small in Cadeau and R.J. Davis. That's my fear for them. But Trimble is not, and I think Trimble can guard anywhere. How much can we expect from at least two of the high-profile freshmen, Jackson and Powell?
I think a lot from both. I mean, it's a pretty crowded rotation.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be interesting to see where they're able to slide in. But I just think from like a sheer talent standpoint, I mean, those are both guys that have not just like pro potential, but have NBA first round pick potential, and you can't hide that stuff. It's got to be part of the mix. And it'll be interesting to see sort of like what lineups they look to get to from a versatility standpoint, to not only like give them some different looks, but also to maybe get more of these guys on the floor at the same time. I'm very excited to see Jackson this season too. That's one of the incoming rookies in college hoops that I'm probably like most looking forward to seeing this year.
All right, let me get to the Wolfpack. Coming off a Final Four, I think that obviously the breakthrough season for them, and it's kind of weird to say breakthrough season as a program because it was kind of an unconventional trip to a Final Four. Now, that doesn't mean they can't – right. They can't – like VCU got to a Final Four under Shaka Smart out of the first four, and it was like they sort of established themselves as a very good program. So, to me, can NC State use the miracle run to the final? Because that's what it was. They're not making the tournament unless Michael O'Connell hits the half-court shot against Virginia in the ACC tournament. I mean, they're going to the NIT, if that, right? So, now can you build off of that type of a Final Four run without the two DJs who did a lot of the heavy lifting? Also, who's the guy that left? Mo Diarra. So, so you're missing three huge parts, but they still have a lot coming back. You have O'Connell back. You have Daniels, Parker, Middlebrooks. You got newcomers out of the portal. What are your thoughts on the Wolfpack?
Yeah, I'm intrigued because like you pointed out, I mean, they lost their two best offensive players and they lost their best defender and rebounder. And, Diarra was just a superhero for them the final 3 weeks of last season. Just incredible stuff. I am curious to know where they're going to get like half-court offensive initiation because I'm a big Michael O'Connell fan. I liked him actually when he was at Stanford.
Right.
I think he's a great hit-ahead passer. I think he does a really nice job getting State organized in transition and in their secondary actions. By the end of last season, he had sort of like come online as a shot maker, off the dribble, mid-range, and catch and shoot threes, like that kind of stuff. So that would go, if that's sustainable, that would go a long way towards like making him like more viable, not as like a DJ Horn replacement, but just sort of like being a guy that could like not just like organize the half-court offense, but also like compromise the defense and make plays as a shot maker. Jaden Taylor, really liked him last season, but I think he needs to sort of like settle into more of like the Casey Morcell role,
right? Of
like 3-and-D catch and shoot. He's a great on-ball defender. He can like really run in transition. He did it when he was at Butler before he came to NC State. So I'm hopeful that he sort of like settles into that role and that they're able to find either via the newcomers, like someone like Marcus Hill or one of the freshmen. Like I'm pretty high on Paul McNeil Jr. Bryce Hurd has obviously played has played well in the preseason build-up for them as well. But they need someone to replace the shot-making of Horn. And,
right.
At the end of the day, half-court offense, no matter what your talent looks like, no matter what your system is, half-court offenses are trying to create advantages, and that starts with getting two defenders on the ball, right? And whether that's a pick and roll, and you've got the screen defender needs to blitz or hedge out or switch, or it's a post up with DJ Burns and the double teams coming. Like, the two most reliable ways by like a considerable margin that State was able to like really create advantages in the half court were Burns post ups and DJ Horn, triple handoff pick and roll actions. And so that's a lot. It's not like, plug and play, with new players.
Right.
Like, you need special offensive talents step into those roles. But Kevin Keatts, what he can always say is historically his teams, he prints top 50 to top 65 offenses, and he has in Raleigh in terms of like adjusted offensive efficiency. They don't turn the ball over. That's a big reason for that. So I will be curious to see what the offense looked like. So my guess is they'll move more away from the post-ups that they had leaned in on the last couple of seasons with Burns. They'll go back to being more of like high pick and roll, spread pick and roll, side ball screen offense. And I think guys like Ben Middlebrooks and Brandon Huntley-Hatfield have big opportunities as guys that can rim run, and Huntley-Hatfield has some ability to pick and pop and face up and make plays on the short roll. So I like the center rotation even without Burns. I'm just kind of curious to know how State is going to make tough shots and also create advantages in the half court this year, because right now there's a bit of a question mark at sort of like the playmaker roles.
Right. All right, we're going to leave it there. Brian Geisinger, 24/7 Sports Buzzbeat podcast at @bgeis_bird. We're going to talk to you on Fridays, so we'll hit you up in 7 days, my friend.
Appreciate it. You guys have a nice weekend.
You too, Brian Geisinger.